Hello, noble ones. Welcome to Metatron's Academy. You know what I like? Old school monochrome screens. So, I'm gonna film the entire video like this. Okay, I'm not. As you know, we review a lot of videos from several channels, including Life in the 1800s, which has become one of my favorite channels when it comes to analysis of old school language, accent, and speech patterns and all of that. Now, today I have a video called Interviews of People Who Lived in the 1800s. What sets this one aside today is the following. The topic seems to be man born in 1853 talks about childhood in the 1860s. Now, this is not just interesting from a societal standpoint, from history and just figuring out how things were in the 60s, meaning 1860s, but also because I want to use it as an opportunity to speak about the importance of infancy and childhood for language development. So as always, I will add my analysis from a linguistic perspective, but of course, do check out the channel so that, they get a like. And it's only 2 minutes 50, so I'm going to let it play first, uninterrupted, and then I'll watch again and add my commentary.
65 years ago, about 65 years ago, I came across the ocean from England to the United States, the family settling in Philadelphia. I there attended the public schools and the Boys Central High School eventually, but there was an interval between my attendance of one of the schools. It was not a direct succession. I was forced out of school at 11 to stay out 2 years because the entrance age of the Boys Central High School was 13, and I was only 11. So the problem was what to do with me during the 2 extra years. Well, some of the advisors said, keep him away from books and let him develop physically. I said, if you do that, you might as well kill me now, because I've got to have my book. So they modified the decision into saying, well, you can have them, all right. So I got hold of a book which was called The Magician's Own Book, a book telling of puzzles and tricks and all kinds of little things, chemistry experiments, electrical experiments. The electrical chapter was what struck me at once, and they told how to make an electrical machine out of a wine bottle. And I immediately set to work and made just such a machine and started it in operation. And I got my first view of electric sparks from that machine, my first knowledge of electricity from that machine. And I made a whole lot of apparatus which is recommended to be made, like Leyden jars and little things of attraction and repulsion, dancing figures and so on, and I had that whole equipment, along with a stool which was made by bottles and the board for making an insulated stool in order to insulate a person that wanted to be charged, and recharge them. With an arrangement of this kind, my father rather pooh-poohed the magnitude of my efforts, and I thought I had to get even with him somehow, so I made a battery of 5 jars and put them into operation and asked him to take the shock. I never heard after he took that shock any more derogatory remarks about my apparatus.
Oh, that was great. That man, and tricks, and I love the old school speech. I just love it. I don't know what to tell you, but I'm a huge fan, guys. I'm a huge fan. Begin our analysis, shall we? Let's make it linguistic.
65 years ago, about 65 years ago, I came across the ocean from England to the United States. The family.
Yeah. Okay. So already, because he was born in 1853, and in 1857, he came across from England to the United States, what is his native accent? How early in your life do you need to move in order to acquire the new location and its accent? So in this case, he was 4 years of age. So the first topic that we're going to discuss is the acquisition and loss of native accents following relocation patterns. And this is a very interesting topic because we're going to discuss brain processes, how our mind prioritizes linguistic information during different developmental stages. In this case, we have a 4-year-old from England who moved to America, and he would very likely lose their English accent and acquire a accent native of America. This is in fact the case, even though you may think that some of the things he says do still sound somewhat British. That is not because he was moving from England, but it's because, due to the age in question and the recording of this video, what we are really witnessing is a transatlantic accent, which was, indeed, at least in the educated elites and educated speech patterns, a mixture between American and English. At age 4, children are still well within the critical period for phonological development, meaning their sound systems remain highly malleable. Typically, children this young will begin showing signs of accent change within months of relocation, with the process often completing within 1 to 3 years. The English accent will gradually fade as the child's brain prioritizes the sounds and patterns they hear most frequently in their new environment, whether it be from peers, teachers, and the media. Research suggests that the critical period for accent acquisition generally remains strong up until around age 6 or 7, with some flexibility extending up to 12 depending on the individual. Do keep in mind that these boundaries are not absolute, and for instance, musical training has been proven to strongly increase your ability to acquire accents, maybe not at a native level, but definitely at a pretty close level, even well beyond into your adulthood, if you have received musical training at least as early as your teenage years.
Settling in Philadelphia. I there attended the public schools and the Boys Central High School eventually, but there was an interval between my attendance of one of the schools. It was not a direct succession. I was forced out of school at 11 to stay out 2 years because the entrance age of the Boys Central High School was 13 and I was only 11.
I love the section where he's showing off how much he loved books. This may sound obvious to us now, but believe it or not, even though books are an old school invention, really ancient if we want to go, depending if we extend due to possible material differences, what a book definitionally is. Still, we can go further back. Even the printing press is kind of a late medieval invention. If you think about it, in the early modern period already has a certain expansion of books, but they do remain relatively rare up until the modern time. Then I remember even the 80s, books were of course ubiquitous. Now, in fact, they're becoming rarer. People don't read books physically. I mean, they do. My wife being a prime example. She loves reading her books. But a lot of people today, they read stuff on their phone, read on Kindle. And in fact, unfortunately, I think the physical aspect of reading a book is going to disappear, remaining something that like collectors like me, or people that are connected to old school stuff and they find it pretty and so they want to maintain it, the same way as there are still people with CRT TVs, even though they have been in the market, mostly replaced by modern LED televisions. I myself have 7 CRT monitors just on the left of me right here. To him, showing off his interest in books makes him special, more than to me when I was a child. Still, however, I do remember the people all the way up to the 1980s were still saying, oh, instead of playing your video games, meaning the NES, why don't you pick up a good book? Maybe you still hear that today, but it is becoming rarer. This is this fulcrum, in my opinion, and the Victorian age of the period where pick up a good book is really something that still needed to be told to the youth, in fact, specifically. So his words are perfectly understandable. While they sound old school, we comprehend the vocabulary, but do we comprehend the perspective from his point of view, of someone whose childhood was indeed in the 1860s? Probably not.
So the problem was what to do with me during the 2 extra years. Well, some of them said, some of the advisors said, keep him away from books and let him develop physically. I said, if you do that, you might as well kill me now, because I've got to have my books.
That's that's nice. That's a bit of a wow moment, isn't it, for the audience?
So they modified the decision.
They modified the decision into saying, this is probably one of the things I like the most about Victorian and early 20th century speech patterns. They're sophisticated. The way they speak sounds almost like the way we write in academic circles, doesn't it? Like high formality. High formality. They changed their mind is really how we would say it. They changed their mind and they end up saying this. Instead, he says, so they modified the decision into saying. I think we lost it. I mean, this was better. I'm sorry, guys. I like this better. We need to bring it back. Bring back the sophistication. Come on, it's fun.
Into saying, well, you can have them, all right. So I got hold of a book which was called The Magician's Own Book. A book telling of puzzles and tricks and all kinds of little things.
A book telling us of puzzles and tricks and all kinds of little things. This is usually a speech pattern that we find in public speech. I'm not sure. It's possible that he would speak like this at home with his kids. However, this did sound a little performative. And do remember that he is speaking in a public scenario and is being recorded and he knows it. The next section, however, is where he uses some vocabulary in a way that is even more foreign to us. And it's this way of utilizing the term machine very loosely.
Chemistry experiments to electrical experiments.
Thank you, Channel, for
The
putting this
electrical
out.
chapter was what struck me at once. And they told how to make an electrical machine out of a wine bottle. And I immediately set to work and made just such a machine and started it in operation. It
sounds like a manual. What I noticed about watching a lot of these is that often they much more freely and loosely apply terms such as machine or device to things that we wouldn't. And that is because we were born in the era of the internet, right? The era of information, the era of the internet, the era of technology, I would say. And now, yeah, we only call certain things a machine. In fact, we don't even use that term as much, which I think we should. But for them, I've heard people calling stuff a machine that you would have never, like a talking machine. And what is it? It's a recorder, but they call it a talking machine because the machine is still a new thing. It's new. So the way it's applied is different. Anything that is perceived as an invention is a machine. Anything that has moving mechanical components is a machine. This is still found sometimes as remnants of highly linguistically conservative languages like Mandarin that calls a plane or an aeroplane. They call it a feiji, which means flying machine, which is probably, and it is what people speaking English called a plane, a flying machine in the early stages of development of the invention.
And I got my first view of electric sparks from that machine. My first knowledge of electricity from that machine.
Yes, a bottle of wine with some wires is a machine.
And I made a whole lot of apparatus which is recommended to be made, like Leyden jars and little things of attraction and repulsion, dancing figures and so on, and I had that whole equipment. Along with a stool which was made by bottles and the board for making the insulated stool in order to insulate a person that wanted to be charged.
I want to say one thing. Of course, he's using very technical terminology because he's a very educated man. People who do other types of jobs, they will be skilled in their trade and they will know the nomenclature of their trade. But what he's speaking about is it's like book knowledge. It's book education. And so he's clearly book educated. But with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if this would be the way he explained things similarly when he was a child. You know, when you look at a person and the way they are dressed, and he's an old man today, someone is in their 90s, and you see that they're usually very well dressed, right? They wear a suit, full suit, maybe a vest, tie, or a papillon, so the bow tie perhaps, and they have a hat on their head, and then they have their coat. And you think, well, he's dressed like an old man. No, he's dressed like he was dressing as a child. Because if you look at recordings of people from the early 20th century and late 19th century, that's how children were dressed. Children from that eras are dressed the way old people are dressed today. Therefore, when we will be old, we'll most likely keep wearing the jeans and t-shirt, or maybe a button-up shirt in a specific way with that type of shoes, and perhaps but young people won't. They'll be dressed in completely different ways, and it already happens. I'm already part of that generation that when I look at kids that are dressed and their trousers are down to their knees. I would never do it. They're free to do it. I would never do it. Likewise, someone who was, as a child, dressed in a suit, tie, vest, the little vests, and a hat, and he sees the way I am dressed with a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, but no hat. Why aren't you wearing a hat? Everyone was wearing a hat, which I think we should bring back. And so to them, he wouldn't do it. And the thing continues. So we do have this perspective sometimes where we think, well, he's just dressed as an old man. No, he's dressed like he used to dress as a child in his era. And we will see it happen as well. Maybe it's already happening. Anyways, just a little video today. Thank you for watching and joining Metatron's Academy. Bye.